Sign the papers, Dad, or I swear I'll tell everyone what really happened to Mom's medication that night. That was the sentence that ended 34 years of trusting my own son. My name is Daniel. I am 67 years old, and until 11 days ago I believed I had raised a good man. I was wrong. Or maybe I wasn't wrong, maybe I had raised a good boy, and somewhere along the way a stranger wearing his face had taken his place. Either way, the man standing in my kitchen that morning, holding a manila folder like it was a weapon, was not someone I recognized. His name is Marcus, my only child, my late wife Elaine's pride and joy, and on that particular Tuesday morning he was trying to steal my house out from under me. Let me back up. Elaine passed 18 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, the kind that gives you just enough time to say goodbye but not enough time to prepare for the silence that follows. She died in the house we'd owned for 29 years, a modest 3-bedroom colonial on Birchwood Lane, paid off in full, worth considerably more now than the $92,000 we'd scraped together for it in 1997. It wasn't just a house. It was every Thanksgiving, every scraped knee, every late-night conversation at the kitchen table when Marcus was struggling in college. It was the last place I heard my wife laugh. After Elaine died, Marcus started visiting more. I thought it was grief bringing us closer. I thought it was love. I was a fool who wanted so badly to believe his check-ins meant something that I never once asked myself why he always seemed to bring up the house situation within the first 10 minutes of every visit. You shouldn't be alone in a place this big, Dad. Have you thought about downsizing? I found this great senior community, resort style really, you'd love it. I just worry about you falling on those stairs. I heard concern, what I should have heard was reconnaissance. 3 weeks ago, Marcus arrived with his wife Priya and a folder of paperwork. He explained very calmly, very reasonably, that he'd consulted an elder law attorney, his words not mine, as if I were already something to be managed, and that the smart move would be for me to transfer the deed of the house into a trust with him as trustee. For my protection, he said, in case something happened to my mind as I aged, in case I made poor decisions with such a valuable asset. I said no, firmly but kindly, because he was still my son and I still loved him, even as something cold was starting to coil in my stomach. He didn't push that day. He just smiled, the smile Elaine used to call his boardroom smile, the one he'd developed since making partner at his law firm 3 years ago, and said, "Just think about it, Dad." I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. The threat came 11 days ago. Marcus showed up unannounced on a Tuesday morning, letting himself in with the spare key I'd given him for emergencies. I was in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how I was sleeping or whether I'd eat, or any of the small tender questions a son might ask a father living alone with grief still fresh in the walls of the house. He set the folder on the counter and slid it toward me like a dealer pushing chips across a poker table. Sign the papers, Dad. Marcus, we talked about this. The answer is no. That's when his face changed. I want to describe it accurately because I've replayed it in my mind 100 times since, trying to understand how the boy I raised could look at me that way. His jaw tightened. His eyes went flat, calculating, the way I imagine he looks at opposing counsel right before he destroys them in a deposition. You really want to do this the hard way? Do what the hard way, Marcus? This is my house. Your mother and I bought it together. It's not up for debate. And then he said it. Sign the papers, Dad, or I swear I'll tell everyone what really happened to Mom's medication that night. The room went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear my own heartbeat suddenly loud and uneven in my ears. He was referring to the last week of Elaine's life, when the hospice nurse had me managing her pain medication, and I, exhausted, sleepless, terrified of watching my wife suffer, had on one single night given her a dose slightly earlier than the schedule allowed because she was crying out in pain and I couldn't bear it, and I couldn't reach the on-call nurse fast enough. I told the hospice team the next morning. They reviewed it, adjusted the schedule, and assured me it was a completely understandable and clinically insignificant deviation given the circumstances. It was documented. It was closed. It was, in every sense that mattered, nothing, a devoted husband making an agonized decision in the dark, trying to ease his dying wife's pain. But Marcus had been in the house that week too, and he'd overheard enough of a phone call to construct an entirely different story if he wanted to. A story about an elderly husband who couldn't be trusted with medication timing. A story that, twisted with the right words to the right people, could raise questions I never wanted raised. Questions about my competence, my judgment, my fitness to live alone, let alone manage a house worth over $500,000. He wasn't threatening to expose wrongdoing. There was no wrongdoing. he was threatening to manufacture a narrative and use his own mother's death as the raw material. I stood there holding my coffee mug so tightly I'm surprised it didn't crack in my hand. "Get out of my house," I said. "It doesn't have to be like this. Get out." He left, but not before saying one more thing, standing in the doorway with that same flat lawyer's calm. "You have until the end of the month, Dad. Think carefully. I don't want to have to make calls to people who could make your life very difficult, but I will." For 2 days, I didn't leave the house. I sat in Elaine's reading chair by the window and I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I got angry, not the hot, useless anger of the first shock, but something colder and clearer. The kind of anger that makes you start thinking instead of just feeling. Here is what I understood sitting in that chair. Marcus wasn't threatening me because he believed I was incompetent. He was threatening me because he wanted the house, and he had done the math, an aging widower grieving isolated without many people checking in, and decided I was an easy target for a story that could hold up just long enough to get what he wanted, especially if he moved fast before I had time to build any defense. He had made one critical error, though. He assumed grief had made me passive. He assumed that because I hadn't fought back in the moment, I wasn't capable of fighting back at all. He had forgotten that before I retired. I spent 26 years as a contracts negotiator for a mid-sized manufacturing firm. I'd spent my entire career reading the fine print other people hoped I wouldn't notice and finding the leverage other people didn't know they'd handed me. On the third day, I made a phone call, not to a lawyer, not yet, to an old friend, Carol Whitfield, a realtor I'd known since she sold us the house on Birchwood Lane 29 years earlier. Carol had watched Marcus grow up. She'd been at his graduation party. She also happened to be, at this point in her career, one of the most respected residential agents in the county, with a reputation for moving properties fast and quietly when clients needed discretion. "Carol," I said, "I need your help with something and I need you to keep it between us for now." "Daniel, whatever you need." I told her everything. Not just the threat, the years leading up to it too, the little comments about downsizing, the trust paperwork, the boardroom smile. Carol, God bless her, went very quiet on the other end of the line, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Daniel, that boy needs a wake-up call, and I think I know exactly how to give him one." Here was the plan, and I want to be honest, it wasn't a plan built out of spite. It was built out of self-preservation, and a father's aching hope that somewhere underneath the threats, there was still a version of my son who could be shocked back into decency if he understood, clearly and unmistakably, that the game he thought he was playing had already been won by someone else. Carol and I quietly began the process of listing the house. Not actually putting it on the open market yet, we weren't trying to sell it out from under anyone, and frankly selling was never really the goal, but we prepared everything. Comparative market analysis, professional photography scheduled, a staging consultation, every visible step a homeowner takes when they are seriously, imminently preparing to sell a property. And then Carol did one more thing at my request. She reached out to Marcus directly as a professional courtesy, the way any realtor would when a family member is listed as an emergency contact on file for an elderly client. She left him a voicemail. "Hi Marcus, it's Carol Whitfield. I sold your parents their house back in '97. Your dad's asked me to help him list the Birchwood Lane property. We're moving pretty quickly. Photography's scheduled for next week. I know he mentioned you might have some questions about the trust paperwork you two discussed, so I just wanted to loop you in professional to professional in case there's anything you need from me for your own records. Give me a call back whenever's convenient." I have never in my life seen someone call back a voicemail so fast. He was at my door within the hour, and this time there was no boardroom smile. There was panic. Real, unguarded 19-year-old caught sneaking in past curfew panic, the kind of panic I hadn't seen on his face since he was a teenager. "What is this? You're selling the house without even talking to me." "Why would I need to talk to you about it, Marcus? It's my house." "You can't just, Dad, this doesn't make sense. Where would you even go?" "I've actually given that quite a bit of thought," I said, and I invited him in because as angry as I was, I still wanted to have this conversation face to face like the adults we both were supposed to be. Carol found a lovely 2-bedroom condo about 15 minutes from here. Single-level, gorgeous kitchen, a little balcony that gets the morning light. Your mother would have loved the light. It's move-in ready. I could be there by the end of next month. "You're seriously doing this because of what I said?" "I'm doing this," I said, and I made sure my voice was steady because I needed him to hear every word clearly, because 11 days ago my son stood in this kitchen and threatened to tell lies about how his mother died in order to pressure me into signing over the house we built our lives in. And I have spent the last 3 days thinking very carefully about what that means, and about what kind of relationship we actually have, and I've come to a decision. Marcus had gone pale. Dad, I didn't mean. I was angry, I was stressed about work, I shouldn't have said that, I would never actually. But you did say it, and here's what you need to understand, Marcus. That house was never going to become an asset you could threaten your way into, it was never going to be leveraged out of me through fear, but it was always going to be something I chose to do with on my own terms when I was ready, and you just made very sure I was ready. So you're punishing me by selling it. No, I said, and this is the part I needed him to hear most. I'm not selling it to punish you. I already spoke to Carol about the actual plan, the one I've been quietly building for the last year and a half since your mother passed. The proceeds from this sale are going into a fund that will cover the condo, my retirement, and a very comfortable cushion for whatever years I have left. What's left over? And there will be a substantial amount left over, Marcus. This market has been very kind to Birchwood Lane, was always going to go to you eventually. Through my will, freely given, the way your mother and I always intended. I watched something break across his face. But understand this, I continued. The moment you threatened me, you didn't just risk that inheritance. You revealed exactly what kind of son I raised when the mask came off and you thought grief had made me weak enough to bully. I need you to sit with that. I need you to really understand what you did and why. Not because I want to punish you forever. Because I love you and I am terrified of the man you're becoming, and I refuse to enable it by pretending it didn't happen. He was crying by then, and I want to tell you it didn't move me, that my anger was some hard, clean thing untouched by his tears, but that would be a lie. Of course it moved me. He was still my boy, but loving someone and protecting yourself from them are not mutually exclusive, and I had spent too many years confusing the two. I did sell the house. Carol handled it beautifully, 3 offers within the first week, $22,000 over asking, closed in 6 weeks flat. I moved into the condo in early spring, and Marcus, to his credit, actually showed up to help me carry boxes, quiet and chastened in a way I hadn't seen from him in years. We are rebuilding something, slowly, carefully. I still see the family attorney I hired the week after the threat, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Renata who helped me update my estate plan in a way that protects me and still eventually provides for Marcus, but on my terms with clear conditions and language that no manila folder full of elder protection paperwork will ever be able to override. Marcus and I talk most weeks now. He's in therapy, which I didn't ask him to do but was deeply relieved to hear. Priya calls me sometimes too, gentle check-ins that feel like genuine care rather than reconnaissance. I don't know yet if we'll fully find our way back to each other. Grief broke something in both of us after Elaine died, and it turned out grief could make a good man cruel just as easily as it could make him kind. But I know this, the moment I picked up the phone and called Carol, I stopped being a man things happen to and became, once again, a man who decides what happens next. That's the thing nobody tells you about growing older. People start assuming the fight has gone out of you. Sometimes all it takes is one threat, one manila folder, one flat and calculating look from someone you love to remind you it hasn't gone anywhere at all. It was just waiting for a reason.